Mm. Hello, good morning, and welcome to another episode of Black Mental Health Matters. I am your host, Rose Gold, and we have a very special guest for today. Stay tuned. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. We are on Black Mental Health Matters, where we are discussing stigmas of Black mental health in the community and also issues that go around that. Today, I have a very, very, very special guest. Miss Phindile Tshabalala, excuse me, is hailing from Canada, and she is here to give us insight on the issues of psychiatric treatment. Now, I do want to just go ahead and get a little bit into Phindile and her background and all of the wonderful things that she has done. Phindile is a public health specialist, and she is in the field of epidemiology with a rich background in maternal and child health, as well as public health preparedness. She is an advocate for women's and children's rights and minority mental health awareness. Phindile, welcome.
Hi, Rose. Thank you so much for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you on the show. I definitely did kind of go into your background before our meeting, and I'm just super impressed with all the contributions that you have made to the mental health field there where you are in Canada. Can you tell us just a little bit about what it is that you do on a daily basis?
So currently, I'm doing a lot of freelance work, specifically working with Black youth.
Mm,
I'm sure, as you know, I live in Canada, Vancouver specifically, and it's diverse in a lot of ways, but there aren't a lot of Black bodies, specifically where I am. So I really want to focus on providing a space for Black youth, Black women, young boys as well,
good.
to be able to kind of discuss certain things that aren't really discussed in a larger setting, speaking about racial inequality and the impact that that has on individuals' mental health, seeing their parents having to go through a lot of this racial inequality and injustice and how that affects them and their ability to parent and raise children in a predominantly white environment. And I think that that is some super rewarding work. It's really great to see how engaging the Black youth here are, and just seeing the value that it has to let them know that they have a space to share their experiences and to voice concerns that they otherwise might not feel comfortable voicing.
Sure. Absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought that up because our topic for today is the issues of psychiatric treatment, right? And I
Mhm.
believe that one of the issues could be or is kind of that being able to voice and having someone to reach out. But before we get into that, just a little bit more about you, just to give us kind of a firm place to build off of. What got you started into the mental health field? How did you pick that career path?
So this was very personal for me. I was diagnosed with depression when I was 17,
Okay.
and I was born in Zimbabwe, raised in South Africa, and that is a predominantly Black environment. A
Okay.
lot of the people that I saw on a daily basis looked like me, sounded like me. So I was very much in an environment where I felt safe, but at the same time, there was that intense stigma around the D word.
Mhm.
People don't talk about depression.
Right.
I was born in into a strong household of like women,
Mm.
and a lot of the kind of phrases are, we don't have the luxury of being depressed. We don't have the time to be sad. And so it was something that you were kind of ashamed of being okay with.
Okay.
And because of it, it made dealing with it, managing my depression so difficult. And I can't even remember how many times I lost track of who I was because
Mm,
this wasn't being addressed. I was too ashamed to address my depression. I was too ashamed to speak within my community about the things that I was feeling. And it wasn't just me. There were so many people that looked like me, that
mm,
sounded like me, that were in this exact same boat. And we were all just walking around miserable because of the stigma, because
mhm,
of the lack of access to resources, and because we're just not talking about it.
mhm,
So that was really the push that I needed to say, you know what? I think it's time that we get over it. We get over the shame and we
mhm.
start talking about it, because if we don't, this pattern is going to continue and it's just going to keep being passed down. And we're just going to hinder ourselves in that process.
Absolutely. That's a very powerful, touching thing that you said. Because even for myself, I'm in the social work field.
Mhm.
Even for myself, I find that a lot of times when you do enter into the mental health field as a professional, there's usually some sort of personal connection to that field, right? Some reason why you personally want to enter that field. So thank you for sharing that. While we're discussing it, and this wasn't part of the original lineup, but I just want to know, in the Black community, as you stated, there's a lot of shame that goes around mental health.
Mhm.
As a mental health professional, what would be your advice to a mom of a Black boy or the dad of a Black girl or both? And they come and they say, Mom, Dad, I'm depressed. How do you think, or how should a parent handle a statement like that? Or what should they do about that?
Listen.
Mm,
All you can do, and the best thing that you could do, is listen.
mm,
Hear what's being said to you
mm,
and ask what you can do. I think a lot of times, and I know this is very true for myself, when you're
mm.
telling someone how you feel, the worst thing is for them to be like, you'll get over it, or, this is how life is.
Sure.
If someone had just sat down and said, "What do you need? What do you think would be best for you?" That makes all of the difference. I also would really strongly encourage anyone that does have this happen to them. If your child comes up to you, if your friend comes up to you and says, "I'm depressed," do your research. We live in the 21st century. We can get onto a computer really fast.
Yeah.
Google depression,
Mm,
Google the symptoms, Google support techniques.
right.
We live in a community where we have resources. It's just a point of learning about them,
Sure.
making sure that you know where to go if you need help or if someone you care about needs help. I think it's so simple, but it also seems like such a difficult task.
Sure. And did you ever feel that because your depression wasn't addressed, or that the people around you didn't take it seriously, do you feel like that negatively affected how you treated it or how you actually were able to manage it?
Absolutely. For the longest time, there was this shame that
Mm,
just washed over you. So not only are you in the pits of a depressive episode that's covered with little support, little shame, no respect for yourself,
yeah,
and your self perception becomes completely skewed. And so, not only are you trying to build yourself up from the feelings that you're having, you're trying to build yourself up from this impression that you have of yourself.
right.
And I honestly think that for a lot of people that I've spoken to as well about this, that is the most detrimental thing to their mental health. That
Mm,
personal shame that comes with not being heard, not feeling listened to.
mhm. And in just hearing you talking, someone out there may be listening and saying, okay, but what's the difference between me feeling like I'm depressed and me just having a bad day? What is the difference between that, or any mental health, but specifically depression, since that's what we're talking about? What is the difference between just having a bad day, or this is maybe a mental illness, you should maybe go get an assessment to see?
Mhm. I think it's so different for everyone, the way depression presents and how it manifests is completely unique to each person. You
Okay.
might be able to pick out specific things. Like, for example, we have a group chat where we just talk about little things, and someone will say, "Hey, I cleaned my depression room today."
Mhm.
And for someone, that means they've lived in their own filth for 3, 4, 5 months.
Yeah.
There there isn't even the courage to wake up in the morning and brush their teeth.
Right.
There is that constant fear and ongoing playlist in their mind that's telling them, "You're not worthy, you're not doing enough." And
Mhm.
I think it's more the continuation and the presentation of those feelings
Okay.
as opposed to, "Today was a really bad day. I'm just gonna get back into bed and try again tomorrow."
Right.
It's really important to recognize if this pattern consists and how it impacts your day-to-day life and your ability to be a part of society, I think is really important.
Got you. That is a wonderful answer. Very enlightening. Thank you. Because I think that, like you said, sometimes depression can show up in so many different ways. And I think that because it is unique to each person, just being able to acknowledge and have people around you to support you through those feelings is ultimately important. So thank you for
Mhm.
that. So just switching gears just a tad bit. You are 17 years old. You're diagnosed with depression. You are managing and building these, getting through this kind of pretty much on your own. You go and you study, and you come to Canada to study. Is that right? Perfect. You come to
Yes.
Canada, you study, you go to school, you're into your career. When did you start noticing that there was a disparity or difference in psychiatric treatment for people of color versus other groups? When did you started to notice that?
So, I went to a very small university here in Canada.
Okay.
I think at most on campus, there was 300 to 400 students on campus
Oh,
at, like,
wow.
full capacity,
Wow.
and it has such amazing benefits because the classes are smaller, you're interacting with your peers a lot more, you're exchanging, knowledge that you otherwise wouldn't be able to exchange, and your
Yeah.
relationship with your lecturers is so much more personal.
Yes.
But it was always, classes of no more than 20,
Mhm.
and you sit there on the first day of class and you're like, "Yep, I am the only Black person in this class."
Absolutely.
And it especially coming from an African country where that was never something that ever happened.
Right.
You were so used to seeing people that looked like you, that sounded like you.
Mhm.
And I remember at the end of my first year, I got into one of my funks. I had some
Mhm.
personal issues at home that were
Right.
brought back up, and having had this pattern going in and out of it, I knew what I needed to do. I needed to go and see someone. I needed to get back on my medication, and I understood that. And I went into this counseling session and where I felt like, okay, this is great. This is where I can just unload. I
Yeah.
remember the response that the counselor had is she looked at me and she was like, "Interesting. And is that something that's culturally specific?" And I remember just sitting on the couch thinking, wow, this is probably someone who has never had a Black female sit in front of
Mhm.
them and
Mhm.
express to them the
Mhm.
issues that they are facing within society.
Right.
And this woman has absolutely no idea how to support me
Yes.
and how to help me when that is exactly what her job title and description is.
Exactly.
And that threw me.
Mhm.
That really, really threw me.
Absolutely.
Because absolutely sure, I'm Black and she's white and she's obviously lived a different life, but in my mind, I'm thinking, "We're in Canada.
Yeah.
We're on ancestral land.
Yes.
Those are people of color." I
Yeah.
would have thought that that was something that was ingrained within a healthcare professional's job,
Yes.
the
Absolutely.
importance of trained intersectionality frameworks.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And so, yeah, that was kind of the moment I realized that it's very, very different for people that look like me.
Absolutely. And just diving deeper into that experience because I can only imagine what you felt, first to even get the courage to go in, right? To get the courage to go in and kind of bear these parts of yourself that are hard and uncomfortable, and then to get that type of response. But you said something powerful. You said that in that moment, that's when you knew that there was a slight disparity, but you decided to continue your studies and do something about it. You decided to enter into the field of mental health and kind of be that advocate and catalyst for other people of color. And that's what I want to dive into as far as issues of psychiatric treatment. When you begin your career, did you start to see, as far as issues, that there was a difference now even deeper into the way that maybe Black males and Black women were treated in terms of psychiatric treatment?
Absolutely. I think there tends to be a bit more of a gentler hand
Mm,
when it comes to dealing with Black women. And sometimes that in itself can also be detrimental
yes.
because that undervalues the experiences of those women. But
Mhm.
at the same time, that kind of gentle hand is non existent for men. For a
Mm,
man, it's you're not sad, you're having a bad day.
mm,
You're a man. You don't get to feel like this. Those are women's feelings. We're putting gender onto something that has no gender.
right.
We're we've put these barriers around a word, a feeling, an emotion that is so unique to every single individual that experiences it. And
Absolutely.
that in itself disadvantages an entire community.
Yes. I agree 100%. And I like how you delve into the part of putting gender on these different mental health issues, right? A lot of times, because in the Black community, I feel that we put like race on mental health, like, oh, that's a white person's thing. But then, even deeper inside of the Black community, Black men are not allowed to be sad. They are not allowed to express themselves. And so it usually manifests itself in other ways. So, as you have been working in Canada, you said that you had stated you live in a predominantly white city, or you work in a predominantly white area.
Well, I guess that's a very unfair statement.
Okay.
Vancouver is very diverse. They are a lot of POC. However, they aren't a lot of Black POC.
I understand. So it's more like different cultures of Black people, but not Black
Yeah.
American.
Well, so there are a lot of Sikh individuals in the
Okay.
community. There are a lot of white Canadians as well that live
Sure.
here. There is a very large Asian population in Vancouver, which is great because it's diverse and you get to learn a lot about different cultures that you had no experience with. But the Black community is a lot smaller than other places in Canada.
Sure.
It is still present.
Sure. Absolutely. Now, we kind of touched on it, but I just want to go a little bit deeper. When it comes to issues of psychiatric treatment, besides Black males, and then we'll go about the women and the children in just a
Mhm.
moment, but Black males, I kind of want to stay there for a second. What are some of the issues aside from them being told that mental health issues don't exist for them? What are the other, I guess, what I would say, disparities or issues that you find in psychiatric treatment for Black men?
So a lot of people that I've spoken to specifically in this regard, there's this need for sedation
Mm,
because for a lot of practitioners, there's that fear of the Black male body. There's that fear that this individual could be dangerous, or this individual is large, they're Black, they're strong. And we don't know how to handle that because society has told us we should be afraid of this. This is
mhm.
something that is unsafe. And because of that, I think that definitely impacts the way they receive care.
Yes.
They're not taken seriously. They're viewed more as bodies as opposed to
Mm,
individuals that are living with something like depression. And that as well can be absolutely devastating and can often and has often, and I've spoken to a lot of people that have been so disheartened by the experience that they've had that they just kind of are like, you know what? I'm going to deal with this myself. I'm going to take care of my
Mm,
depression my own way because the
right.
people that have been put into the place to take care of me, to provide me with the care that I deserve, haven't been trained, haven't been taught how to practice mental
Mhm,
health in an intersectional and interpersonal way.
mhm. Absolutely. And for those issues, what are some things as a practicing mental health professional in terms of the way that you see Black men being treated in a psychiatric world? What do you feel? And you can just give me two. What do you feel are two solutions that could pivot in your area or maybe even across the entire globe, the way that Black males are treated in terms of psychiatric help?
I think the first thing would be power dynamics,
Mm,
recognizing that everyone is on a different level.
mhm.
And we hate to say this, we all want to preach about equality and equity, but we
That
live in a
part.
society
Mhm.
where the body that you are in and the body that is presented to society is how you are treated and how you were judged.
Period.
Absolutely. And because of that, we need to address power. We need to
Mhm.
address power dynamics and the way in which we use power to practice mental health support.
Mhm.
I also think trauma and our approach to trauma based care is vital.
Tell me more about that.
I'm sure you've heard, as we all have heard, the term generational trauma
Yes.
and how people speak about the way in which trauma is passed down from one body to the next
Mhm.
until it is really kind of ironed out from the top to the bottom.
Mhm.
The issue is, how do you combat something that you have no experience in?
Mm.
And that's where training comes in.
Right.
And that's where I'm going to once again use the word intersectionality.
Yes.
That is the key, in my opinion, to improving the support that Black bodies receive when it comes to mental health. Intersectional training of our healthcare workers is crucial.
Absolutely.
And it's something that we don't talk about enough. It's something that we don't push for enough.
Mhm.
And until we do, we are going to continue to be disadvantaged. Regardless of where we seek our help from, we
Yeah.
are going to continue to get bottom of the barrel, low tier support until that is something that becomes a top focus when it comes to training healthcare professionals.
I agree. And you know what? I think that you made a very valid point in regards to training. I think that, cultural awareness is extremely important when you are evaluating or working with anyone.
Mhm.
But I don't think that, like you had stated earlier, everything is culture based, right? Mental health is not a culture thing; that is a human thing. And I think that really that training is a vital piece. I do want to say, I do want to ask you, kind of going into the other direction with the other groups that I have mentioned before, the women and children. Do you find that when women in your line of work, right?
Mhm.
Do you find that when Black women go in for help or when they are treated, do you find that they are perceived as angry a lot? And then if so, what are your thoughts on that?
So there are two words that are very triggering for me when it comes to mental health and Black women, or just healthcare in general and Black women, and that is strong and angry.
Mhm.
Because those two words, in my opinion, once again, destroy any type of healthcare that a Black woman is going to get.
Agree. Mhm.
I could be perceived as angry right now in speaking about this topic
Yes.
by the tone of my voice
Yes.
and the
Yes.
way it goes up and down depending on what we're talking about.
Sure.
I'm not angry, I'm passionate.
Right.
But if someone that didn't look like me was having this topic and we were talking about it, they're passionate.
Exactly.
And so I think there are so many stereotypes that are just kind of connected to Black bodies, Black women, Black men, Black children. And those are stereotypes that we need to destroy.
Mhm.
Those are stereotypes that should not be a part of the way someone practices healthcare.
Absolutely.
And I have found a lot of the women that I speak to when they talk about going to find a healthcare professional, a psychologist, a therapist, they refuse to see someone that is not a Black woman. They
Mm.
would rather self-medicate, self-care, self-help because of the fear of being put into the category of angry Black woman or strong Black woman.
Mhm.
When you're pouring out your heart to someone, you don't want to sit there and hear them say, "Wow, you're really strong."
Right. That's
That doesn't help you.
at all.
That it's not a compliment.
No, it's
You
not.
don't enjoy hearing it.
No.
It honestly makes us feel devalued. It
Yes.
makes it feel like the sacrifices and the things that we've been through aren't worthwhile and don't mean anything.
Mhm.
And so I think rhetoric is so important. The words that we choose to use are so powerful. And I think it's so important for us to take a step back and think about the language that we use when we try to address certain things. And
Absolutely.
that is something that also needs to be considered when we're talking about training our healthcare professionals.
Absolutely. And this is just I guess, opinion based or personal preference, however you decide. But what are some, for someone who maybe doesn't have experience in dealing with a Black woman?
Mhm.
Um, Black woman comes into an office. Let's say I'm a white female or white male. She comes into my office expressing these things. What are some other words that I could use as a mental health professional outside of strong and outside of that kind of I don't want to say backhand compliments because I don't think that it's maybe intended that way, but that's what it really is. What are some alternative words that a mental health professional can use when they're dealing with someone of color who's expressing these things outside of just the word strong?
Mhm. I think one thing that I found works for me is having them repeat the words that I use back to me.
Mm,
Because one, that lets me know that you're listening,
sure.
and two, that lets me know that you're not putting any of your outward views of me
Mm,
into this conversation.
sure.
I think another thing is it's okay to ask what someone needs.
Right.
You don't have to have all the answers. You could say, "Listen, as your healthcare professional, what do you need from me?
Right.
What are the kinds of things that you feel I could do to support you on your journey to well-being?"
Hmm.
The word strong, though it has a lot of positive connotations in the context of women dealing with the struggles that they do on a daily basis, it's not comparable.
Not.
It's
No.
absolutely incomparable, and
Really.
that I don't even know if there's a word that you could use. I mean, you could say, "I recognize the struggles that you have
That's
been
good.
through. I could never imagine myself in that position, and I commend you on the determination that you have to continue to do
Mm,
better and to be better." Just positive reinforcement in a non-condescending way
yes.
goes a really long way.
Absolutely. And if my therapist said that to me, I would be so happy. I would feel like I can talk to them about anything. If they
Mhm.
just use those kind of words instead of calling me strong, compliment my journey, compliment how
Mhm.
I've overcame, instill in me those positive reinforcements, like you just said. That's really, really good. And I know that we're more so talking about issues of psychiatric treatment, but I still am interested in this Black family dynamic in terms of issues of
Mhm.
psychiatric treatment. So I want to ask you, do you see a lot, I'll just tell you this, in my community, a lot of single mothers, which I think is just part of the generational journey that we are in the process of breaking, because up to today, I did read recently, the American Psychiatric Association put out some numbers, I think it was in 2020, that for the first time in a long time, they're actually seeing a dip or a decrease in Black single mothers, which is a good thing, right? Do you feel
Mhm.
or do you see in your line of work that parents or Black mothers, Black fathers, single together, do you find that there is shame in them seeking treatment for their child?
Absolutely, because for them it's viewed as a failure, an
Mm,
inability to have provided enough for your child
mm,
so that they wouldn't feel those emotions, they wouldn't exhibit those signs of depression. And it's so important to have that conversation within those communities to say, this is so far beyond what it is that you provide. I mean, I absolutely believe that circumstances do play into a diagnosis,
sure,
but at the same time, I mean, it can make your depression better or worse.
right.
But at the same time, it's so important to let parents know that that's not a failure.
Right.
If anything, pat yourself on the back if your child is comfortable enough to sit down with you and say, "Mom, Dad, I think I have depression," or
Mhm,
"I think something might be wrong."
mhm,
That shows you that they trust you enough to confide in you something so emotional, something so painful for them. So I think really reinforcing that as long as they have a strong support system
mhm,
that is continuously going to be behind them,
mhm.
it's not something to be ashamed of. It's not a failure. It's just another thing in life.
Absolutely. It's another stage in life that you as a parent can help your child through in whatever way that you can. But
Absolutely.
your stance on this is that there should not be shame. You should not feel like you failed. You shouldn't internalize it as the parent that this is something that's your fault. I like
Absolutely.
I like that. Do you feel that parents, and this is kind of a biased question because I don't have children, so I want to ask you, do you feel that parents can contribute to the mental illness of their child? And if so, how so?
That's a difficult question.
Sure.
I will say yes.
Okay.
And I will say the environment in the home
Mm,
is very, very, especially at a young age, if you're a child or a teen that is diagnosed with depression, your at home environment plays a huge role in how you your depression manifests. A supportive environment that looks to help you better ways to deal with your depression obviously will
mhm,
help you.
absolutely.
And I'll speak from a personal point of view.
Mhm,
When I was diagnosed, after that kind of diagnosis and getting my medication from the pharmacy, that was it. The
okay.
discussion was over. It was never a conversation that was had in house. And because of that, so many other things fell through.
Mm,
I felt like I wasn't being heard. I felt like I wasn't being seen in my own home.
mm,
My ability to recognize that, oh, this is just a depressive state was not there. I just felt like that was going to be who I was for the rest of my life.
mhm.
medication as well.
Right.
I thought, I'll take this for 3 months and then be done with it. It was very much an individual thing that I had to go through on my own. And because of it, that journey was so difficult and honestly really did impact how my depression manifested. So I think a supportive home where the research is done is so important. That's honestly the one thing that I would push parents to do the most. Do your research, be supportive, be whatever it is your child needs you to be. And it's so easy to say, but how do I know what to do? Ask them.
Mm-hmm.
Sit down with your child and ask them, as your mom, as your dad, as your aunt, as your grandparent, what do you need from me
Mm.
to support you? And go from there. There's nothing wrong with not knowing what to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I like how you ended that with that there's nothing wrong with knowing what to do, because I think a lot of times in the Black community, that's part of the problem. My child is coming to me saying that they're having these thoughts of suicide or or whatever, that it may be in
Mhm.
terms of mental health. What do I as the parent do? A lot of times what Black parents will do is just tell you to go to church, or they'll say pray about it, and things like that. But I personally, as a believer, I believe that in addition to that we also have professionals here that are
Mhm.
trained, that God also made, that can that can help your child. So just kind of dousing into that. Um, Most Black people, in terms of just the generational trauma that we were talking about, are living in survival mode in terms of just trying to break away from what they were raised in. That's
Mhm.
what it is in my community. A lot of survival mode. I'm just trying to not be what I've seen, right? How
Mhm.
do you think, in terms of psychiatric issues of treatment, right? Do you think, how do I want to ask? Do you think that a mental health professional should be versed in the background of the individual before they start treatment?
So, just to double check, in terms of individual, do you mean the specific person that is going to seek their help?
Yeah. So, like, if a
So,
person is, yeah, walking into a therapist, I'm a Black person, I'm a Black male, but I come from this traumatic environment, violence, drugs, things like that. Do you think that professionals address those tropes, should address how that person grew up or their background? Or do you think that it's more effective and helpful to kind of address where they are now and how to manage current mental illnesses that they're dealing with?
I feel like it's valuable to address the start.
Okay.
And I say that only because depression is a loop.
Mm.
A lot of the
Okay.
things that manifest with depressive feelings are things that happened in the past that are playing over and over again in your head. Things that might have happened 10 years ago that you forgot about, but now you're in this depressive state and they've come right up again. Remember when I said that thing, or I did that thing, or I wasn't good enough in that? Is this going to be the exact same situation? I think it's so valuable to recognize what's happened in the past
Hmm.
because that's how you heal.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I know the person that I see, their intake was write a little bit of a paragraph on your journey from start to finish,
Mm.
where the depression started and where you are now.
Hmm.
The big parts in your life, the big moments in your life where your depression was really, really bad, and when it was something you thought you would never experience again. Because that's exactly what depression is. You get on that high and you're like, I was depressed. I can't even remember what that feels like.
Right.
And then you get into that low and you're like,
Mhm.
I don't remember when I was happy.
Sure.
And so to be able to map that out and pinpoint what was happening in my life, are there patterns? Can we
Mm.
connect the dots? If we can't, that's okay too. That
Absolutely.
also will help us in our treatment and our journey. So absolutely, I think it's really valuable to have at least a brief understanding of that person's lived experience and background.
Right.
because that gives you a bit of insight into what kind of treatment they might need.
Mm, absolutely. Thank you for that because I think that a lot of times it can be tempting to just kind of, and even for the individual, not just the professional, I think a lot of times it can be tempting to just go from where you are right now rather than dealing with or attacking kind of what led up to this, what led up to not necessarily what led up to the depression, but what led up to who you are now and how you are dealing with it. You know what I mean? Very,
Absolutely.
very important. I did just want to kind of pivot just a little bit, and I don't want to take too much up of your time, but these are facts that I can't let you go without asking you about. I can't let you leave me without asking you. What are your thoughts connecting issues of psychiatric treatment to the criminal system? How does that funnel? How do issues of psychiatric treatment funnel individuals into the criminal system when maybe they should have just gotten treatment or mental help, or maybe mental health is what made them do the crime or whatever? How do you see those two, the criminal world and the issues of psychiatric treatment, kind of intersecting in your line of work?
So I think something that really stands out to me is how even, and we're in 2022, I was about to say we're in 2021, but even in 2022, there are, just an example, I was in the liquor store down the street from where I live with my roommate, and from the moment I stepped foot into the store, I was followed the entire way through. Whilst
At
I
the
was
liquor store?
at the liquor store, whilst I was picking my bottles, making our monthly run, follow, and I could see my roommate who is, or physically presents as a white male
Mm,
in the corner, keeping an eye on me and this individual that was following me.
yeah.
And I thought in my mind, I was like, if I was stealing, how would that have played out? What
Yeah.
would that have situation looked like?
Exactly.
And I talk to a lot of parents who have kids that act out
Yeah.
and they do things because sometimes there's that kind of risky behavior that comes with dealing with mental health.
Yes.
A lot of people do certain things just to feel something.
Yeah.
Stealing is a big part of like behavior that comes within the mental health sphere because it's that act of rebellion that makes you feel something that you haven't felt in a very long time, any kind of emotion.
Yes.
And so I think that kind of training needs to be present not just in the people that we call our healthcare professionals,
Mhm.
people in the social service industry, in the service industry, in our government service industry. I think we really need to start sitting down with
Mm,
specifically our youth
mm,
and pinpointing, what was the reason behind this behavior?
mm.
Is there something that is underlined in the actions that you've committed?
Mm. I agree with that. I'm just looking here because you had said something as I was taking notes earlier, kind of in connection to that, about how kind of and this is kind of to do with the shame of the that the parent feels. Where I live, if a child is convicted of a crime and they're under the age where they can be convicted, right? And it's a serious crime, or if they have been in trouble more than 3 times, the state that I live in, they automatically require or request that there's a diagnostic assessment. And for those of you who are listening, not mental health, that's just basically an assessment that professionals do to kind of determine where you are on the mental health scale. If you have, mental health illness, whatever, right? Do you think that something like that is helpful in terms of making sure that a person gets the treatment they need versus getting the jail sentence that they need?
Absolutely. I think I would go farther to say that I think that that's something that a lot of schools should really be
Mm,
more persistent on. We talk about lack of resources and lack of access to resources. The school system is where your child spends a large amount of their time out of the home.
Yes, I
If
agree.
those services were implemented in our schools, they're accessible, they're free, and they cover a large base of healthcare that is needed,
Mhm.
I think we would be living in a completely different society.
Mm.
So to hear that that's something that they do, I think is phenomenal. I would hope that that was something that is done in most places, but the
Right.
reality is it's not
It's not.
because the resources just aren't there. But I really do think that we tend to glance over the fact that mental health plays a huge part in a lot of the behavior that we as individuals manifest in our daily lives. And until we recognize that and accept that, we're going to be stuck in this loop
Yes.
of talking about
Mhm.
Black mental health mattering. We
Mhm.
know it matters. Why does it matter? We're telling you why it matters. So let's do something about it. Let's put these systems in place,
Absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely. Phindile, I just want to say that you have enlightened me. You have transformed the way that I think and talk about mental health, and I'm sure that the audience feels the same. I will definitely have your information. So if people want to connect with you in the show notes, I appreciate you so much for taking the time to come out and explain from the perspective of a mental health professional how these different issues of psychiatric treatment, not only how they are affecting our community, but also how they can be fixed. I appreciate you and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Black mental health matters. Do not forget about it. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, Rose.